The war between the Vox and the humans didn't take long to spin up. Even with a dozen planets near a complete loss, the Vox simply used it as a rallying cry across their entire territory. For Vox, it is pride and honor for them to destroy anyone that dishonors them. This is a culture of ritual battle, ritual marriages, a sign from birth, a culture of a strict caste-based system in place only to allow the absolute best to be found and to be raised up. Digging into the histories, it is actually clear that raising yourself above your station relied on being the absolute best, along with a good dose of timing, that is. When the humans studied the histories of the Vox, it is clear that the best can be found, but if they are a threat to the status quo of what is perceived of power and authority, or should say who holds the power and authority, they might just have an accident. A few lucky ones would be sent into a location to be set up to fail. If they succeed, regardless of said conditions, then they would be raised up above their caste. If they are still considered a threat to the status quo, though, they would find an accident waiting for them. The human diplomats would have their military representative explain this by saying, "We've seen this before. The funnier someone claims to be, the more cringe-inducing they are. The stronger and more dangerous someone claims to be, the weaker and more pathetic they actually are. And the more honorable a group claims to be, the more dishonorable they truly are." The other species diplomats could not fully emphasize this position. You see, even though their logical brain had understood it, they really couldn't fully grasp the situation because it just wasn't them. Something like this is just not part of their cultures, so it is what it is. What they inquired about is simply, if humanity understands this and has lived through it, why are you so eager to be around a species like everyone else that never embraces these concepts? When asked this, the humans actually showed their teeth as one of them responded with, "To us, your honesty is refreshing. It's like taking a full breath of fresh air after being inside for too long." While much of the universe tried to comprehend it all, humanity began their total war. Very few times did humanity use their species-destroying weapons. Instead, they preferred to get close and get personal, as in they would get their hands actually dirty. You would not believe this phrase at the beginning of the battle, but by the end, oh yeah. The humans claim to be a patchwork species, as in no unifying government over the entire species was ever in full display. With each battle, different tactics are used. Though the weapons are similar, their deployment can be radically different. Something that most species believed was a weakness was now actually a strength. One of the more confusing space battles happened when a single dreadnought-sized ship arrived in a Vox sector, flanked by 6 small destroyers and 6 more frigates. A pair of slag merchants witnessed and recorded the entire battle. The humans, at first, sent out a communication, which is apparently an attempt to end a battle before it begins. The signal was sent across all spectrums, so even the slag picked it up. An image of a human was in full military uniform, standing there stoically looking into the camera. Over his shoulder was a strange being that the slag found out was a visual version of the ship's artificial intelligence. Noticing this, it just reinforced the concepts that humans will actually bond with things, and not just things that are organic. Before the human could talk, all eyes actually went to the small 3D image of a half-human, half-fox female with bleach white fur. Her piercing blue eyes looked into the souls of all who were watching, making most not even realize that she was wearing a short, ornamental robe. As her ears seemed to flick a little bit, the man spoke. "This is the human fleet war sniper. To all Vox, you will stand down all your forces, or you will be destroyed. You will not have any other warnings." Then the image just disappeared. The slag merchants just watched as the Vox continued to rally their fleet. As they advanced, charging their weapons on the way, something happened to the human ship. The large dreadnought, even though it wasn't slowing down, seemed to open row upon row of doors. Looking close, you could see that they opened on not just the port and starboard sides, no, but also the ventral and dorsal sides, as well as the bow of the ship itself. As it did this, small drones began to launch. Drones that, from what they could see, were barely 3 meters wide by 3 meters tall. But that wasn't the main body. That was the arms that stretched out. It was odd. The slag observing this were actually having trouble calculating the numbers of drones that poured out of the ship as it advanced. They didn't even care about the specifications of the drones, but looking at so many. Looking at the screen, the slag could see the contact of combatants on the battlefield rising. It passed 1,000, then 4,000, 6,000, 10,000, 20,000, 50,000, 100,000 within a minute, all the way up to its flashing uncalculable across the screen. The death cloud of these drones wrapped around the enemy fleet at distance before turning and attacking from every different direction at once. The Vox did die shooting and screaming, but they died quickly as the drone swarm just crunched in on them from all sides. It wouldn't matter the size of the Vox fleet. There was just too many. The slag watched the drones move away from the now twisted hulks of the Vox ship and sweep around the planet, taking out all defenses the Vox had as the human ship nonchalantly approached it. The slag watched the drone swarm return to the carrier in a quick but surprisingly orderly fashion. They watched as the destroyers fired onto the planet what seems to be a multitude of items sent down to the surface, many of them simply looking like odd teardrops. That's when one of the slag ship turned to actually get a closer look, maybe to scan these items to see what they are. Then, as they did, the human AI suddenly appeared on the screen. She raised her arm and waved her finger, saying, "Bad," then followed up with, "You should go home now." Realizing the point of what she just said, they immediately did, very, very quickly. As the slag began briefing all the other species about what they saw, another crew burst in. The Watcha crew pushed the guards aside as they held up a datapad, screaming about how, "You need to see this! The humans have gone insane!" The council members told the guards to pause and let the crew approach, though they did let the crew approach, even though their hands were placed right next to their weapons, just in case the crew was not there for friendly intentions. The captain of the crew hurried to his own representative to input his device. As they rushed, the representative asked him why he was in such a rush. What was going on? Where's the fire? The captain didn't answer, as he was still pale and focused on his work, and then he stopped, hit a button, and it played the recording. On the recording was a human fleet, easily twice the size of the Hussar fleet that liberated the Lapin. In the center of the formation was a quartet of dreadnought-class ships, with battleships actually surrounding them. Along with that was the support of destroyers, cruisers, frigates, and corvettes. The humans actually were facing down one of the shipyards of the Vox, though a smaller shipyard. It still maintained a massive fleet around it, as ships were simply being sent off the moment they were finished. This meant that the humans were currently outnumbered 38-1. As the Vox moved into position, the transmission reached every ship, station, and planet in the sector. "This is the human fleet, America. Stand down and surrender. You will have no additional warning." Over the shoulder of this admiral speaking was another ship AI. This time, it took a very human shape. It appeared to be a female warrior with metal armor on its torso and forearms reaching down over its digits, yet the top of its arms were bare. Looking at it, it was clear that the neck-long blonde hair accentuated the deep blue eyes and delicate features, yet no one even cared, as they couldn't miss the very large ballistic weapon it carried, which seemed to have metal teeth slung underneath the barrel. This was weird to everyone else. The admiral left the line open, and the humans seemed to wait until someone said something near him. The human jargon made the admiral look into another direction. In the council chambers, as they watched, they looked on the readout from the Watcha crew, and it's clear that the Vox had no intention of backing down. On another part of the display, it was clear that the Watcha ship that was recording this was actually on full burn, trying to get as far away from the battlefield as possible, and no one could blame them. As they did this, the video shows the human admiral sigh as he then made the call, "Bridge to main gun. Chief Ava, drop one right on their heads." Before the transmission cut out, the admiral looked into the camera, raised his fist up with his digits facing him, and then extended his center digit, and then the video stopped. Everyone turned to the next screen, showing the human elite fire their first shot from that same dreadnought. It was quickly followed by the other three. The massive las cannons only took a few moments before impact with the Vox fleet, each one cutting through the Vox ships in front of it in moments as it cooked its way through, and still continuing on towards the shipyards. The ships that were struck were clearly cut into pieces, but the fate of the shipyards was so much worse. Since they're actually far more fragile than the ships that they build, the shipyards broke apart and started to fly out of control. Unable to hold their orbit anymore, the shipyards began to plummet to the industrial planet below. As the shipyards that were struck began their long journey towards the surface, the main guns continued past. The beam had not fully broken yet, and it was headed right towards the planet. The resulting impact was mitigated a lot by the planet's own defenses from light, radiation, and so on, yet it was still devastating. Looking after the beam finished hitting, there was a perfect burn circle on the surface where everything had just been superheated above 6,000 degrees Fahrenheit in a matter of 2.3 seconds. Or a large portion of ocean simply exploding due to the sudden evaporation as the beam struck down into it. Seeing the range and devastation of human cannons, the Vox did exactly what you don't want to do. They hesitated. This gave the human fleet another free shot that pierced through the enemy lines, then took out more stations, and then struck the planet once again. Seemingly pulling their heads out of their collective asses, the Vox charged and tried to rush the humans. That is, until the readout showed the Vox spinning up their FTL engines. The micro jump later, and they were almost on top of the human fleet. Many speculated that the Vox probably figured that the dreadnought was defenseless up close, being specialized for long-range fire and only long-range fire. They were wrong. Not wasting any time, the human vessels, to include the dreadnought, began to spit out fire in every direction. Las guns of all sizes cutting through the hull of enemy ships. Ballistic coil guns and turrets taking out the Vox ship with a single strike. Medium ballistic and energy weapons spraying around and spinning madly. rapid-fire point-defense guns, sending out so much ballistic fire that they could actually be mistaken as energy weapons at that moment. Guided munitions were also launched, so many in fact that it filled the space as it seemed as though thousands, even tens of thousands, filled the space, penetrating deep into a ship before delivering their load with such a strong burst that it would break the back of the ship it just entered, leaving the ship drifting in space as it leaked out components and crew from the hull that was left. The council looked on in horror at the video as the humans cut apart the Vox forces with such malice and precision that a few council members actually had difficulty maintaining control over their bodily functions. Though the human ships all had battle damage by the end of said battle, every human ship was, at least, recoverable. As the larger ships are seen to attach the disabled smaller ships to their hulls in preparation for the jump, others separated from the main group and headed towards the planet. As they advanced, the human battleships destroyed the rest of the shipyards, sending them drifting towards the planet's surface along with their moon. The smaller ships then entered the planet's atmosphere. The ships actually didn't reach the surface, nor were they actually trying. The ships began to use their EMPs to shut down the planet. Again, within moments, massive fires began almost immediately as all the electronics inside this industrial area just burst into flame. They had to work fast, though, as the jamming pods were no longer effective. A multitude of Vox aircraft tried to intercept the frigates and destroyers that were skirting inside their atmosphere, but then soon realized that the EMP would stop not only the aircraft, but their guide and ordnance as well. Only a single Vox fighter was able to fire its main energy beams into a human ship before the EMP burst, a burst that immediately not only shut down the weapons, but the engines, and everybody was thinking, boy, I hope that thing has an ejection pod. It didn't do much more than scratch the paint. However, in that moment, one of the Vox had actually earned the respect of a crew. The Watcha captain then received the transmission from the humans, "Go away," which they did right into the council chambers where they showed the video. The council was in shock at what they had just witnessed. They thanked the Watcha crew and, of course, gave them a little compensation, and was in stunned silence as they pondered the implications of what they just saw. Though they wanted to confront the humans on what the hell was going on, the council wouldn't be able to do so, as the humans had decided that they would not be part of the council until the war is over. They need to be able to conduct things freely. From that point on, the council could not go through a single session without discussing the humans and how the war was progressing, as it seemed as though the humans were winning every engagement. Many thought that the war would actually be over much faster than the humans said, though these thoughts were immediately pushed down as everyone would simply pull up a star map and remind them that the Vox had hundreds of planets that needed to be either conquered or destroyed, and this would simply take time. To one species, though, they had wished that the war would actually end yesterday. The Watcha had a breakout of a disease that turns out to be very slow, very painful, and very, very, very deadly. Seemingly, a species-wide pandemic had struck, and all other species had quarantined them. And with no ships in or out of their territory, and no supplies coming in or out, and they're having difficulty keeping their personnel healthy enough to actually travel, it would only be a matter of time before the Watcha would shrink down to single percentages compared to what they were, or they would simply go extinct. In desperation of this event, some tried to leave but were always denied entry into other territories. Those that tried to forcibly land in other territories were forcibly evicted from their meat suits before they could make planetfall. Yelling out to the rest of the galaxy, the Watcher begged for help. Yet for weeks, months even, there was no response except for, "This is your problem," which was the gist of it. After understanding this, the Watcher finally believed that the other species had left them to die. Probably, they figured, just to claim the territory once they're all gone. Realizing this, many begin to prepare themselves for the mass ritual suicide. In the Watcher culture, this is the most honorable way out of this situation. And as they prepared, they cursed the other species for leaving them to rot, to slowly die off so that what? The others can claim territory? Of course, it is free real estate. Many of them now understood the human phrase. The High Cleric began her long sermon as each of the Watcha kneeled down next to the ceremonial blades. As she sent the sermon to each planet, the High Cleric asked for a miracle, something to stop them, something that would keep them going as a species. When she asked this, there was nothing. So she continued her sermon, and all across each of the planets they could all hear her. Yet, for some reason, they heard something else. What they heard was a transmission coming in. What they received was a translated voice breaking through the speakers that simply stated, "Never give up hope. Sometimes it's the only thing that can keep you away from the void of despair." They knew this phrase. It wasn't said exactly right, of course, which confused the living crap out of everyone. And this definitely was not the High Cleric. This was a male voice, not a female voice. What the hell was going on? Everyone was confused as they still held their blades at the ready to finish the ceremony. Then, each of the Watcher planets, the sound of a human fleet announcing themselves, every single one of them saying, "This is Captain whoever it might be. This is Admiral. We're here." Most of them finishing off their own announcement by saying, "Sorry it took so long. Traffic's a bitch." Across the Watcher territory, millions of blades are suddenly dropped to the ground as they look up, and human ships descend onto each world, station, and colony that still had survivors. Those ugly flying bricks that the humans used had never looked more beautiful to anyone ever. Each one adorned with a symbol, a white square with a red symbol on it. From that part on, that symbol would be held in the highest regard by all species as it meant salvation. The humans, once they landed, disembarked their ships in large biohazard suits. Then they immediately began to set up chow and medical tents along with bringing the infected inside to be tested. The youngest of the insectoid Watcha were treated first, which surprised the Watcha, but they didn't complain considering all they were receiving. It was clear to even the least trained eyes that an operation this large has actually put the war with the humans on hold. This could become very detrimental to the humans, but they seemed to not even care about it. They cared about something else, the Watcha. What the humans did actually care about, though, was saving lives. The Watcha didn't understand why they were so dedicated to this because the Watcha have large families. So losing a few of their young before they even reach maturity is not a huge dramatic event. Traumatic, sure, but not something they're going to cry for days about. At least, not in comparison to the humans. The humans would keep working on one of the infected that had dropped long after the locals would have simply given up. And they would keep going no matter what. Yet, with each loss of life, the humans seemed to take it personal. Many, breaking into tears or screaming in frustration for not being able to keep even a single from their demise. More than 100 times each of the watches saw a human, many of which were called Doc, would have to be told to actually stop by another human's. Stop and let the watcher go. There was nothing more they could do. The frustration on the human that had to be stopped was beyond evident as many times as they struck something or threw something away. And then they would simply collect themselves and move on to another. Even with the human intervention, though, millions perished as the disease ravaged the Watcha. For almost 2 solar rotations of the Watcha homeworld, 2.8 years in human times, the humans brought food, medicines, and did everything they could to save the Watcha from their grisly fate. In the end, they were not successful. In the end, the Watcha were no more. In the end, what was able to actually cure the Watcha was a genetic therapy that adjusted the Watcha at the molecular level. Doing this made it impossible for the disease to actually continue. It had nothing to feed on anymore, and it would simply die. As more and more Watcha are cured, it's clear that the therapy had a distinct side effect. The Watcha were surely still insectoids, but their exterior looks had changed to be much more human, surprisingly. This freaked out the Watcha as they didn't know what they were looking at when they looked at their own reflection. Many of them started actually going into panic attacks, too. Yet, it wasn't long before the rest of the galaxy told them, "You've never looked better." Before the humans left after curing the Watcha, the different species around the universe had a question for the humans. Why? Why would you risk so much to help another species, one that cannot do the same for you? The response was simple. Because we're human. That is what we do. And they would simply turn and walk away afterwards. Everyone understood at that moment that human cultures are actually very complex. It is a hell of a shock to see such efficient killers care so much about a distant species. Yet, if they knew what the humans had actually discovered in those 2.8 human years, they wouldn't be shocked or grateful. They'd be terrified. Hello, everybody. This is Syntax. Thank you for joining me on today's chapter. Before I go, I need to send out a quick thank you to one of our newest channel supporters, the Lockeen. Thank you very much for supporting the channel. Everybody else, I'll see you next time. This is Syntax, ejecting.